The story begins on the final day of the World Sweets Championship. All eyes in the massive arena were fixed on a single contestant. He was not chasing victory alone. He carried a dream far greater than a trophy. His goal was to create the most elegant, breathtaking confection humanity had ever known. For years, he had endured hardship, sharpened his craft, and devoted every waking moment to this art, all for this decisive stage beneath the brightest lights of the culinary world. At last, his masterpiece was revealed. A magnificent phoenix sculpted entirely from sugar and confectionery rose before the judges, radiant and alive. Gasps filled the hall. Victory felt inevitable. Everyone believed the title was already his. Then, tragedy struck. Without warning, the massive phoenix collapsed. The towering sculpture came crashing down, crushing the man beneath its weight. In a single cruel moment, a life of devotion ended, along with a dream that had never been fulfilled. As he lay dying, regret flooding his final thoughts, a higher presence intervened. A ruler beyond the mortal world appeared and offered him a second chance to return to life and let his extraordinary talent bloom once more. He was reborn in a remote land as a child of the Molden family, given the name Pastry Molden. Long ago, this region had been nothing but barren sand, incapable of supporting life. That changed under the relentless efforts of Pastry's father, Viscount Casserole, who spent over 20 years transforming wasteland into fertile soil. Thanks to him, the Molden territory now consisted of 3 thriving villages, each home to around 40 people. When Pastry turned 9, his father began training him in swordsmanship and combat, pushing him harshly to mold him into a future warrior capable of protecting their land. But Pastry's heart was never with the blade. His passion belonged to sweets, the same passion he carried from his previous life, yet a cruel obstacle stood in his way. The Molden region could not grow sugar. Without sugar, every dream of confectionery faded into nothingness. While Pastry struggled with this dilemma, a loyal servant named Sheets arrived with a report. There was good news. The bean harvest that year was abundant, thanks to Pastry's practical suggestions that had boosted productivity, even as famine loomed across the kingdom. But the relief did not last. Sheets delivered grim news next. Fierce battles had erupted nearby against a band of outlaws. Though many were defeated, 50 of them had survived, and were now marching straight toward Molden. If the bandits reached the territory, years of effort would be reduced to ash. With only 30 able-bodied men across all 3 villages, Pastry quickly realized that direct combat would mean certain destruction. Viscount Casserole considered asking Count Reitz, the neighboring ruler, for military aid. Sheets immediately warned him of the political consequences. If villagers defeated a bandit group the Count himself had failed to eliminate, it would undermine his authority and provoke dangerous conflict. Worse still, Sheets suspected the Count might actually benefit from Molden's destruction, allowing him to seize what remained. Sensing his greatest dream slipping away, Pastry made a firm decision. He would stand against the bandits, no matter the cost. His resolve impressed Sheets, who proposed a daring plan. Pastry would become their hidden trump card by undergoing the rite of consecration, an ancient ceremony capable of awakening magical power beyond human limits. That night, Casserole explained everything to his wife Agnes, Pastry's mother. He told her how dangerous the situation had become, and how their son was the key to survival. Agnes objected at first, unable to accept exposing such a young child to such danger, but Casserole reassured her that Pastry's abilities far surpassed those of ordinary children. In the end, Agnes agreed. She dressed Pastry in the finest clothes she could find, even if they looked more suitable for a girl. This moment, she believed, demanded distinction above all else. Pastry's older sister, Josephine, eagerly joined in, treating him like a living doll as they decorated him together. On the day of departure, Pastry felt exhausted from the excessive adornments. Agnes knelt beside him, offering gentle words of courage. Nearby, his friends Mark and Lumi came to see him off. Mark joked that he wanted clothes just as fancy, only for Lumi to laugh and tell him they would never suit him. Casserole entrusted Sheets with managing the territory in his absence, then activated teleportation magic, instantly transporting himself and Pastry to the royal capital, leaving Mark and Lumi staring in disbelief. Along the way, Agnes and Josephine continued teasing Pastry about his appearance, filling the journey with warmth and laughter. The moment Pastry arrived in the capital, his senses were overwhelmed, not by the buildings, but by the smells. Food, spices, and especially sweets filled the air. He instantly realized how severely his homeland lacked essential ingredients. Noticing his son's fascination, Casserole promised to buy him something special after the ceremony. Pastry struggled to choose, but his gaze finally settled on apples. Inspiration struck. He proposed planting apple trees back home. Casserole understood his son's intent. This was not simple curiosity. It was the ambition to strengthen their land. Pride filled his heart. Yet deep inside, Pastry's true dream remained unchanged. A kingdom of sweets, a land overflowing with sugar and chocolate. Their destination was the church, where a renowned priest awaited them, someone Casserole had met during Josephine's own ceremony years earlier. The priest was visibly shocked upon learning that a child as young as Pastry would undergo consecration. Meanwhile, Josephine and Sheets discussed the rite and the powers it bestowed. Josephine recalled her own experience with a bittersweet smile. Her magical aptitude had been judged weak, forcing her to forfeit parts of the ceremony. Now, she held only one wish, that her little brother would awaken power far greater than her own. Elsewhere, Pastry was kept bound and blindfolded. He was given nothing but small sips of bitter water at long intervals. The priest whispered to him that magic was not something borrowed from the outside. It was a force buried deep within the human soul, and only suffering could unlock it. As a day and a half passed in this state, Viscount Casserole grew increasingly uneasy. The length of the ritual worried him, but the priest reassured him that prolonged hardship was proof of extraordinary magical potential. Even so, a father's anxiety never faded. In the darkness, Pastry's mind burned with excitement rather than fear. He imagined apple-based sweets he would one day create, golden pies, caramelized apples, endless variations without limit. Then, without warning, a brilliant golden light enveloped him and sank into his body. When Pastry opened his eyes, he heard his father's voice announcing the ritual's success and their progression to its final stage. The priest began chanting sacred verses, formally affirming the boy's exceptional magical level. As the words echoed, Pastry experienced vivid visions, memories of his former life as a master confectioner, clarity about his reborn existence, and a full understanding of the unique magic now flowing through him. When the consecration ended, both Casserole and the priests stood in stunned reverence. The priest finally declared that Pastry's power far surpassed that of any ordinary human. Casserole paid the priest with silver coins and prepared to leave. The priest had expected such payment from a lord who ruled through warfare, yet greed whispered that the sum was not enough to guarantee his silence. On their way back, they stopped at the market. Pastry carefully examined two apples, one heavy and full, the other bright and flawless. His obsession with perfect ingredients made the choice difficult, but he finally decided. Impressed, the merchant added extra apples as a gift. Pastry tasted apples for the first time since his rebirth. The flavor overwhelmed him, and he shared the moment quietly with his father. He even suggested keeping this luxury a secret from others. As he ate, his thoughts raced ahead, step by step, building his future kingdom of sweets. At the same time, the priest stared at his coins with resentment, muttering threats of exposing Casserole's visit. Elsewhere, bandits ravaged a nearby village, burning and looting as if cruelty were routine. 3 weeks passed. The villages worked relentlessly, constructing defenses in preparation for the attack. News arrived that the bandits were moving far faster than expected. The battle would begin 2 months earlier than planned. Casserole ordered an emergency meeting, summoning village leaders along with his trusted followers, Cointreau and Les Sages. The decision was clear. Evacuate the smaller villages and concentrate everyone in the largest one. This strengthened their defenses and lured the enemy into a carefully prepared trap. Supported by food reserves lasting 7 days, Pastry oversaw every preparation. He understood that low numbers would become a fatal weakness if the battle dragged on. At his side were his chosen aides, Arcar and Luminato, sons of Casserole's retainers and future pillars of the territory. Pastry instructed everyone to gather stones for a specific purpose, keeping his true intent to himself. At sunset, the bandits appeared on the horizon. Warnings echoed across the land. Casserole delivered a rousing speech to steel the men's resolve, then departed with his elite followers on a forward assault, leaving Pastry in charge of defense. Before leaving, Casserole explained the plan: strike, withdraw, and lure the enemy toward the northern entrance. Once he departed, Pastry ordered Arcar to inform Cointreau at the western canal that flaming arrows would be the signal. Luminato coordinated with Les Sages to prepare them the moment hooves were heard. Pastry organized a small unit of children skilled with slings, urging them to remain calm and precise. Nearby, his sister comforted frightened girls as tension thickened the air. Casserole launched his surprise attack, using magic to locate enemy positions before retreating after inflicting losses. Enraged, the bandit leader pursued recklessly. Flaming arrows lit the sky. Stones and arrows rained down as the bandits were drawn into the trap. The plan worked until the leader climbed the village wall, forcing the archers to stop to avoid friendly fire. The children stood their ground, hurling stones with courage. When the leader struck at them, Pastry stepped forward, taking the blow himself. In that instant, he unleashed his magic, transferring pain and damage to every attacker on the field. The bandits collapsed, overwhelmed by agony. Mark Rollo seized the opening and ended the leader with a decisive strike. Pastry watched the aftermath in stunned silence as broken weapons littered the ground. News of victory reached Agnes, who panicked upon hearing of Pastry's injured arm. She was quickly reassured. It was only a shallow wound. As prisoners were escorted to a temporary holding area, Thalia questioned their fate, suggesting they be sent to Race Province to restore order in Regis. Casserole, however, demanded fair compensation for the damage done. The conflict ended with a celebration honoring the brave. Arkar and Luminato were rewarded with swords and sacks of barley for their loyalty beside Pastry. Arkar returned home proudly, greeted by his mother's tears of joy. Pastry made one thing clear to everyone. These companions were the foundation of Molden's future. After the battle, everyone gathered at Luminato's home. Her grandfather welcomed them with proud smiles, deeply impressed by the confidence she had shown, far beyond her years. The villagers celebrated together, tables filled with food and drink. Even the children joined in, sipping milk so they could feel part of the moment. The adults praised the youngsters endlessly, amazed that such a simple trap had overturned the battle's outcome. Pastry, however, was elsewhere in his thoughts. In his mind, he was already designing his first true recipe, apple pie, the foundation of his dream. Lost in imagination, he barely noticed as Arkar and Luminato quietly slipped away. Luminato admired her new sword with pride. Arkar, trying to act brave, asked about the bandits' fate and learned they were locked inside the village's main storehouse. Driven by curiosity and a sense of future responsibility toward Molden, they decided to see for themselves. The guards refused, warning them of the danger. Arkar didn't give up. He distracted the guards by throwing stones at the rear lumber shed, then slipped inside with Luminato. The moment they met the bandit leader's terrifying gaze, their confidence wavered. The leader noticed Arkar's sword. Arkar proudly explained it was a reward, unaware it had once belonged to the man before him. With cunning calm, the leader pretended to accept defeat and offered to teach Arkar swordsmanship and magic. Tempted by the idea of becoming as strong as Pastry, Arkar hesitated. Despite Luminato's warnings, he stepped closer, left his weapon. In an instant, the leader broke free, slashed Luminato, and seized Arkar as a hostage just as the guards rushed back. Surrounded, the leader used Arkar as a shield, stole a horse, and escaped, abandoning his men behind. Pastry arrived moments later. After checking Luminato's wound, he grasped the severity of the situation. Without hesitation, he pursued the fleeing leader, relying on the traps prepared along the escape routes. As he ran, something awakened within him. Pastry realized he could replicate magic he witnessed, adapting and applying it in new ways. Back in the village, Viscount Casserole and Thalia were furious at the guard's negligence. Casserole ordered his chief retainer to ride with him, but the man, Fiole, argued that Casserole's presence was needed to keep morale steady. Reluctantly, Casserole advanced alone. The leader's horse triggered a hidden trap, allowing Pastry to catch up. A fierce duel followed. The leader was stunned by the boy's skill, but Pastry was gradually overwhelmed by sheer physical strength. Arkar cried out, begging Pastry to run. Pastry refused. Their bond mattered more than survival. The leader struck with full force, shattering Pastry's sword and leaving him defenseless. Elsewhere, a retainer named Phi searched desperately using detection magic. Finding only the broken sword, he panicked and assumed the worst. He returned it to Casserole, dread hanging over everyone. Then the door opened. Pastry was there, unharmed, sleeping peacefully in Agnes's arms. He had returned secretly with Arkar, and she had refused to let him out of her sight. Under his father's pressure, Pastry revealed the truth. At the critical moment, he had copied Casserole's teleportation magic and escaped the fatal blow. Casserole immediately understood the danger of such a gift. He ordered absolute secrecy and warned Pastry never to use unfamiliar magic recklessly, lest powerful forces turn him into a weapon of war. The next day, Pastry joined Arkar in the kitchen. Burdened by guilt over Luminetto's injury, Arkar could barely speak. Pastry reassured him and brought him along to visit her, carrying a freshly baked apple pie. The aroma alone lifted everyone's spirits. As they ate, Pastry quietly taught Arkar a lesson about resolve and responsibility. Suddenly, Jolosag, Luminetto's father, stormed in, pretending to be furious. Then, with a grin, he jokingly suggested Arkar make amends by marrying his daughter in the future. Arkar froze. Luminetto didn't object. A month later, a new crisis emerged. Casserole confronted Pastry with a blunt report. "We're bankrupt, rebuilding villages, digging wells, and securing supplies after the bandit attacks had drained every reserve. The promised reward of 200 gold coins was lost due to an administrative error involving Mark and Dorabur. Loans from nobles were refused without exception. As for family aid, it was impossible." 15 years earlier, Casserole and Agnes had fled together after both families rejected their marriage due to Molden's poverty. All ties had been severed since then. The land was safe, but now it was broke. Pastry returned to his companions carrying a weight they had never seen in him before. There was no avoiding it. He told them the truth about Molden's collapsing finances. Mark, ever the loyal friend, urged him not to hide anything from them. Problems shared, he insisted, often revealed solutions no one expected. To ease the tension, Pastry asked about Lumi's condition. She answered calmly that she was regaining her mobility, though sudden flashes of pain still struck her from time to time. Mark suggested expanding farmland to increase production, but reality shut the idea down immediately. They had no time, no workers, and no money to support such an undertaking. Lumi then proposed selling Pastry's sweets in the city, only for him to admit that he lacked even the funds for basic ingredients. Trying to lighten the mood, Mark jokingly suggested Pastry teach magic for profit. Lumi laughed and warned him that careless thinking like that would get him burned, literally. Hass stepped in with a smile, noting that their constant bickering was simply proof of deep friendship. Then Lumi grew serious. She said magic itself might be the real key, and asked Pastry to show them what he could do. Pastry remembered his past life when hours of discussion with fellow experts had led to new creations. He agreed. He asked Mark and Lumi to draw anything they wanted in the dirt. Mark sketched himself as a heroic mage slaying a dragon. Lumi drew a playful magical image of Bonka. With a precise motion, Pastry copied the drawings and reproduced them flawlessly on their hands. Lumi stared in disbelief. Pastry explained that such images could permanently bind to solid surfaces like wood or walls, but on human skin, they faded after 3 days. Lumi wondered aloud if he could do the reverse. Copy real faces or buildings and turn them into precise images. Pastry froze for a moment. Then it hit him. Marriage portraits. Pastry suddenly shouted that Lumi had found the golden solution, leaving her flustered and red-faced. He rushed to find Viscount Casserole, who was already discussing their financial crisis with Fiole and Agnes, hesitating over the idea of seeking help from in-laws. Pastry burst in with his plan. "Father," he said, "haven't you already considered arranging a marriage for Josephine? She's 13 now." He explained that teleportation magic could introduce Josephine to nobles, but the real profit lay in selling portrait services. Many noble families lacked magic and were forced into expensive journeys to royal banquets just to find matches for their children. To prove his point, Pastry copied Agnes's face onto a wooden board with stunning accuracy. Casserole and Fiole were speechless. It looked like a mirror. Casserole estimated they could charge 5 to 10 gold coins per portrait, perhaps more, given noble vanity. Fiole worried about Pastry's magic being exposed, but Pastry assured him that people would assume his power was limited to artistic magic alone. To test the market, Casserole decided to visit Retest, using the bandit incident as a pretext to meet Countess Brias Retest. From her palace window, Brias watched them arrive, assuming they had come to blame her for failing to suppress the bandits. She was the eldest daughter of the former count, who had died in battle, followed by the mysterious death of the rightful heir. After formal condolences, Brias invited them for tea. Pastry eagerly grabbed the region's famous biscuits, only to be deeply disappointed. The tea was no better. Casserole maintained his composure, praising Brias's military and agricultural achievements. When she asked about Molden's sudden growth, Casserole dropped the truth. "All of it comes from my son, Pastry." Brias stared in disbelief. A 9-year-old? Pastry seized the moment. With calculated calm, he claimed that Molden had been attacked by hundreds of bandits, a deliberate exaggeration to raise pressure. Bryce struggled to hide her shock as Pastry continued, revealing that captured bandits had confessed to originating from Retest village. He casually suggested handing over a few prisoners for questioning, a veiled threat that official investigations could reach her lands. Bryce tried to defend her territory's reputation, boasting of past victories and claiming some fugitives may have fled there. Pastry countered calmly with Fiol's detailed report, exposing the brutal raid on Retest village before the bandits moved on to Molden. Then he delivered the final blow. If you weren't involved, who truly fought the bandits, and how do you explain what happened? Driven by pride, Bryce refused to concede easily. She questioned every claim and demanded clear proof from Pastry. At the peak of the negotiations, Casserole stepped in decisively. He drew a sword bearing the crest of Retest, presenting undeniable evidence that the bandits were indeed tied to Retest village. The color drained from Bryce's face. She immediately realized her earlier claim, that the bandits had been eradicated, was false. Haas calmly explained that Retest's failure to contain the problem had caused direct damage to Casserole's lands. Though escalation was never their goal, ignoring such losses was impossible. Pastry stood firm on compensation. Bryce offered 100 gold coins. Rejected. She raised it to 130, still not enough. At last she agreed to 150 gold coins. Though shocked at being outmatched by a child, Bryce accepted the terms, fully aware that Pastry was anything but ordinary. After signing the contract, she openly acknowledged the transformation of Casserole's territory and admitted she had underestimated him because of his age. More importantly, she knew this payment was insignificant compared to the disaster of losing the king's trust. Later, Bryce asked about Pastry's reaction to the tea and biscuits, curious if something had displeased him. With perfect diplomacy, he replied that the sweets were simply too sugary and suggested offering a lighter option to balance the tea. Before he could elaborate, Casserole jokingly interrupted, announcing it was time to depart. Pastry apologized for not bringing a gift, but made up for it immediately. Using his magic, he created a portrait of Bryce on fine cloth. She was genuinely astonished and thanked him with sincere admiration. Father and son left with quiet pride, confident that trust, creativity, and their bond would guide what came next. The scene shifted to the secondary estate of Duke Catlasek in the royal capital, where Pastry and Casserole attended the coming-of-age celebration of the Duke's grandson. The Duke teased his grandson relentlessly, calling him a child despite the ceremony. Casserole ignored the mockery and expressed his honor at receiving the invitation, words that pleased the Duke deeply, especially coming from a war hero. The Duke formally introduced the guest of honor, announcing that the young man had graduated top of his class from the Internal Officers Academy. Squall, flustered, admitted his admiration for Casserole. Casserole encouraged him to relax, reminding him that his rank was higher. The Duke revealed that Squall had long admired Casserole and had eagerly awaited this meeting. As more young nobles gathered around Casserole, attention eventually shifted to Pastry. He introduced himself with refined confidence, leaving a strong impression. The Duke mentioned hearing that Pastry had reached the age of maturity and asked whether he had received magical blessing. Upon confirmation, the Duke was visibly pleased, convinced that House Marshal was favored by the divine. Asked to demonstrate his magic, Pastry borrowed a piece of cloth and flawlessly copied the image of Petra onto it. Gasps followed. The Duke accepted the portrait with admiration, and it was revealed that Squall harbored feelings for Petra, the portrait serving as a gift from Pastry and the Margrave. Petra herself was absent. Pastry explained that she was the third daughter of Lord Hoburg, whom he and his father had met previously. Casserole added that Margaret suffered constant border disputes, making Petra's travel sensitive. That was why Hoburg had requested introductions. Squall was clearly captivated by Petra. Casserole and Pastry exchanged a knowing glance. The first offer was landing perfectly. Pastry followed with a second move, mentioning Petra's upcoming coming-of-age celebration and expressing hope that Squall would attend. Before anyone could object, Squall agreed without hesitation. The Duke watched carefully. He understood that Casserole and Pastry were acting as emotional intermediaries, and that underestimating the boy would be a grave mistake. He hesitated, citing the difficulty of travel, but Pastry calmly mentioned Casserole's teleportation magic. Sensing the Duke's unease, Pastry revealed the deeper truth in confidence. Hoburg sought this marriage to end border conflicts by relying on the Duke's military strength. The Duke relaxed, thanked Pastry, and promised to consider the matter seriously. He confirmed his attendance at the celebration and reaffirmed his trust in Casserole. The party continued. Squall approached Pastry, asking to address each other by first names and solidify their friendship. He asked about Petra's interests. Pastry replied that she loved sweets and mentioned gifting her homemade biscuits, which had delighted her. When the topic returned to the portrait, Squall admitted he wanted something with more emotion. Pastry noticed the genuine passion in his eyes. After the celebration, father and son returned home, where reconstruction continued. Casserole chose to personally cover food and firewood expenses until completion, despite knowing it might affect his authority. He valued his people's comfort more. Fi remarked that such lords were rare. 2 letters soon arrived, one from the Duke, another from Hoburg. After reading them, Casserole announced that great fortune lay ahead. They would receive 20,000 silver coins for successfully arranging Petra and Squall's match. The engagement would remain secret until Petra came of age, with an advance payment of 30 gold coins to fund her personal protection. Everyone understood the sensitivity and the risk of opposition. Secrecy was essential. Pastry warned that the church might interfere. Casserole agreed calmly. Official neutrality meant nothing when the offering was sufficient. At the same time, their neutral position granted them access to information others could never obtain, making the plan far more complex than it initially appeared. Casserole could protect Petra himself using teleportation magic, but the real challenge was not moving her alone. The problem lay in transporting guards and attendants safely to the capital, and securing proper protection the moment they arrived. Teleporting Petra by herself would be reckless. Moreover, the head steward insisted that the engagement remain secret, conducted quietly and without leaks. Fi warned that hiring guards from the capital was risky. Suspicious elements could slip in unnoticed. Still, Casserole was determined to succeed. Gaining the trust of 2 major powers within the kingdom was worth the risk. Pastry agreed. This move aligned perfectly with his own ambition, the future land of sweets. That was when Pastry proposed a clever solution. They would use a ritual chamber known as true consecration, a sealed room with thick walls and no windows. During the coming-of-age ceremony in the capital, Petra would remain hidden inside. The ritual would be presented as unusually long, while Petra stayed safely concealed until the engagement was officially announced. The plan was approved immediately. Flight suggested reusing the 30 gold coins if mercenaries were unnecessary, but Pastry produced a receipt from a traveling merchant. Apples and sugar among the purchases, intended for confectionery. Casserole scolded him for spending on personal interests and temporarily cut off his allowance. The day of Petra's transfer arrived. Casserole and Pastry welcomed Hoburg, explaining that Pastry's role was merely to keep Petra company during the journey, though in truth, he was monitoring the plan from behind the scenes. After greetings, Hoburg credited the success of the arrangement to Casserole's wisdom and magic. They boarded the carriage, where Petra was already seated. She greeted them warmly and thanked them for escorting her. Casserole praised her calm demeanor, while Pastry expressed happiness that she had enjoyed the biscuits he once gave her. Petra shyly admitted she had not stopped thinking about their taste. Pastry began explaining how sweets were made, but her mother urged them to depart. After settling in, Pastry greeted Licorice, Petra's younger sister. She responded coldly. Petra gently encouraged her to be kinder, reminding her of the risks everyone was taking. Licorice apologized, and Pastry took no offense. They reviewed the plan. First, enter a church within Margaret under the pretense of performing true consecration. From there, Casserole would teleport them to the capital's church, where Petra would remain hidden until the engagement announcement. A guard unit awaited them. Hoburg warned of hostile movements, but Casserole assured him his men were prepared. As the carriage moved through the streets, enemies watched from the shadows. Upon arriving at the first church, everyone disembarked with weapons drawn. An ambush erupted. The guards repelled the first attackers, but another assailant appeared suddenly. Pastry stepped forward. "I won't let anyone approach the ladies." Casserole joined the fight, and the attackers fled once they realized they were outmatched. Hoburg thanked both of them sincerely for protecting his daughters. Licorice was shaken. Pastry reassured her gently, saying they were safe as long as they stayed together. He took her hand while guiding her up the stairs. She grew flustered. Despite being younger than her, Pastry carried himself with surprising maturity. Licorice realized something unsettling. Pastry was the only one who never compared her to Petra. She had always lived in her sister's shadow, convinced Petra had been chosen simply because she was more beautiful. Her confidence had faded over time. She remembered how cold she had been to Pastry before, and yet he still helped her without hesitation. At the top of the stairs, Petra asked if the consecration would be performed there. Pastry explained that Casserole would teleport them to the capital, where the ritual would continue. Relieved, Petra and Licorice followed him into the chamber. Everyone joined hands. Casserole activated his magic, and they were transported to a church in Bufalia. Elsewhere in the city, a strange man gathered mercenaries inside a ruined house. He claimed the mission would help him rebuild House Armenia. His true target was House Katlasek. When asked directly, he revealed the objective: not assassination, but kidnapping Petra. Success would earn them 10 gold coins. Failure was unacceptable. After he left, the mercenaries discussed his arrogance. They understood his plan clearly. First, tarnish House Katlasek's reputation. Second, present himself as Petra's savior, forcing a marriage and elevating himself into nobility. Back inside the church, Pastry noticed the heavy guard presence outside the windows. Casserole explained they belonged to the Margrave. Pastry admired the force, noting that their family could never assemble such numbers. Petra admitted her anxiety about the engagement. Pastry reassured her, saying that meeting Squall would clarify her feelings. He spoke positively of him. Petra smiled, admitting the portrait had left a good impression. The Margrave arrived, informing Petra that the panda priest was ready to begin. Fiel joined them and reported that a massive gathering was underway at House Katlasek, with nobles arriving from distant regions. Casserole stated plainly that this marriage would unite the Margrave's house with the Duke's, forming the strongest noble family in the kingdom. Casserole tasked Pastry with escorting Licorice to the reception room while Petra underwent the ritual. Only then did Pastry notice how exhausted she looked. Fiel whispered advice: walk with her, be gentle. Pastry complied, explaining that the place was overwhelming and that a private room had been prepared for her to rest. After hesitating, Licorice shyly took his hand. Fiol joked, warning Pastry not to make any girl cry. Casserole immediately scolded him harshly, forbidding such careless remarks. At the same time, the strange man sat as if he were celebrating in advance. He raised his wine and smiled to himself, consumed by a single idea: House Katlasek would pay. Exactly as he imagined. Across the city, the carriage and guards moved according to plan. They escorted Petra to the church so her rites could be completed. Then she would return with her father as arranged. Casserole and Fiol watched every step with restless eyes, and when Petra's part proceeded smoothly, they exchanged a quiet conclusion. Only Licorice remained. Casserole explained that their mission officially ended once the Margrave and his daughters returned home safely. He was satisfied so far, but he didn't relax. A crowd meant variables no one dared say aloud. Threats often appeared late, precisely when people believed the danger was already over. Fiol's worry took a different shape. He feared Pastry being alone in a room with an unmarried girl. Casserole dismissed it. Licorice's purification rite was about to begin, and she was under the protection of a powerful escort named Bira. That made Pastry blink. He had assumed Petra would be Licorice's main guard. Then Bira, a maid, appeared, sharp-eyed and harsher in tone than expected. She declared that protecting Licorice was her duty. The edge in her voice unsettled Pastry. He asked her to calm down, and in the next heartbeat, his instincts screamed that something was wrong. Then the ground shook. A strange sound rose beneath them. Stone split. The earth cracked open like a black mouth, swallowing Pastry and Licorice in an instant. Bira screamed and bolted, shouting for help. Casserole arrived immediately. One glance was enough. This was not a natural collapse. A mage had created a bottomless pit. Casserole ordered Fiol to inform the Margrave at once, then jumped in without hesitation. Below, Pastry regained consciousness piece by piece. Pain, dust, then the realization that he and Licorice were bound. A mercenary leader stepped forward, speaking as if he intended to explain. Pastry cut him off calmly, saying he already understood. The leader offered to loosen Pastry's restraints if he behaved. Pastry's mind moved elsewhere. Why kidnap him? His family wasn't wealthy enough to justify a ransom. Then he looked at Licorice. The answer was obvious. She was the target. The leader assigned one guard to watch them and warned Pastry that any reckless movement would cost him his life. Pastry didn't argue. He made a silent decision instead. Licorice would survive, no matter what it took. When Licorice woke, Pastry asked if she understood what happened. He explained everything he knew so far, and kept his voice steady until her breathing calmed. She chose to trust him because his tone was the only thing in that darkness that didn't shake. Their guards sneered at Pastry's composure, calling it empty show. Pastry watched him carefully. He had already identified the real danger, not brute force alone, but the mage among them. Pastry questioned the guard with calculated innocence. The reply was cold. They only needed Licorice. Pastry could be killed without hesitation. Pastry didn't flinch, but he still lacked one crucial detail: their location. So he changed tactics, pretending to break down. When that failed, he pivoted again and claimed he was the eldest son of a noble whose father could pay 200 gold coins, maybe more if a noble was involved. Greed flickered in the guard's eyes, and that was enough. While the guard's mind wandered, Pastry studied his surroundings. Details suggested this land had once belonged to a ducal house, one that had fallen 10 years ago. Pastry remembered the list of potential threats from the escort planning. One name rose clearly: Duke Armenia. He didn't waste a second. He copied the information onto a strip of cloth using his magic, then used Casserole's teleportation magic to send the strip upward. Above, Casserole returned to the church searching for any additional clues. Fiole arrived with difficult news. The Margrave had decided to focus on Petra's engagement ceremony, making it extremely hard to mobilize his men right now. Casserole understood the political weight. Still, he insisted there was a path if they could confirm the kidnapper's identity. Beera, still trembling from shock, screamed at Casserole, accusing him of coldness, as if he didn't care that Pastry and Licorice had been taken. Casserole replied evenly that he trusted Pastry. If the boy was with Licorice, he would not let the situation collapse easily. The words calmed her. Just a little. Then light flashed. A strip of cloth materialized before them. Casserole read it, and the truth snapped into place. Pastry and Licorice were being held at Armenia Estate. Casserole immediately ordered Fiole to gather a force from the Duke's side while he recruited volunteers outside the church. Below, the situation detonated. The mercenary leader stormed in, furious. He had discovered the worst mistake possible. They had kidnapped Licorice by accident, when the original target was Petra. He lunged toward Licorice. Pastry moved instantly, teleporting to Licorice's side. Even so, the leader's fist caught him hard. A mercenary demanded an explanation, and the leader spat it out. The job was ruined. They had taken the wrong girl, and above them, the engagement announcement was already happening. Pastry understood what came next. They couldn't profit anymore, so they would erase witnesses. The leader refocused on Licorice. Pastry stepped in front of her without hesitation, seized a ready sword, and became a wall between her and death. He struck down one attacker, then faced the leader, whose expression tightened at the speed of the shift. Licorice watched, stunned. For the first time since the pit opened, she felt something close to safety. Pastry told her quietly that he would never leave her. Then he demanded the leader surrender. The leader mocked him. Pastry's voice sharpened. Checkmate. The leader reassessed him with growing regret. He had underestimated a child, and now the estate was filling with chaos as Casserole's forces began to break in. A man named Ormer watched the expanding disorder with visible worry. Pastry held the leader in place long enough for help to arrive. When Casserole and Jolisag reached them, servants rushed to free Licorice. Father and son faced the criminal together. The leader attempted to open an escape route with magic. Casserole warned Pastry not to chase blindly. When the immediate danger ended, Casserole finally exhaled. Pastry and Licorice were safe. Servants from House Catlasek and House Hoberk arrived. Hoberk's attendant confirmed Licorice's condition and returned her to her father. As she was led away, Pastry lifted a hand and gave her a small wave. Then they moved to secure the remaining criminals. A young noble asked about the mastermind, and Casserole revealed it was Ormer, a man who had once been caught trying to flee secretly during a war 20 years earlier. House Armenia had lost its title under suspicion of collaborating with the enemy. Casserole used the story as a lesson for Pastry. A lord's actions are never personal. They can destroy a house or save it. A report came in. The dukes were waiting at the estate to hear what happened. Casserole and Pastry stepped back, leaving formal explanations to others. But one problem remained. The mercenary leader could still vanish. They pursued him before he disappeared completely. While servants searched and argued about where he might have fled, Pastry began to suspect the escape had worked until he examined the exit and noticed something. The remaining magic residue was faint. Too faint, meaning the leader hadn't gone far. With men surrounding Armenia Estate, Pastry asked the only logical question. How could he escape unnoticed? They returned to the room. Pastry addressed the mercenary directly, and the leader revealed himself with a grin. His name was Strudel. He admired Pastry for seeing through the trick. Strudel's plan had been to pretend he escaped, wait until everyone relaxed, then slip away. He prepared to fight. Pastry insisted on a one-on-one duel. Strudel laughed and asked if a child truly believed he could follow through. They introduced themselves formally. Strudel admitted he had abandoned his family name long ago. He accepted the duel because he believed experience alone guaranteed victory. He attacked. Casserole watched with tight fear. Pastry parried. Then, one precise motion, Strudel's sword snapped. Casserole seized him as he collapsed unconscious. Half aware, Strudel demanded to know how he lost so quickly. Pastry answered with a rule that never changed on any battlefield. Never lose focus on your weapon, not for a heartbeat. Casserole examined the broken blade and understood what Pastry had done. Pastry explained that he had replicated the damage pattern from a cracked wall nearby, weakening the sword at the exact moment it mattered. A month later, the official engagement ceremony between Squall and Petra was held inside the royal castle. The couple greeted nobles and dignitaries with bright smiles. Casserole and Pastry were stunned by the grandeur. Whether the announcement was public or private, the scale was overwhelming. The Duke approached, greeted them, and thanked them for resolving the crisis, then thanked Pastry directly for protecting Licorice and saving her life. Pastry responded modestly, saying he only did what duty demanded and that anyone in his place would have done the same. The topic shifted to Squall's immaturity. Casserole and Pastry reassured the Duke that he would improve with time. Pastry attempted to mention suspicious details from Licorice's kidnapping, hinting at a third party who had fed false information about Petra. The Duke ordered him to stop immediately. Pastry played the innocent child. Casserole also warned him, quietly, but with pressure. Still, Pastry didn't retreat easily. With careful words, he convinced the Duke to support Molden's regional expansion plans and clarified why he had misled the kidnappers before. He only meant to confuse them. He never expected Licorice to be taken instead of Petra. The Duke disliked that Pastry had used the mistake to his advantage, yet he couldn't deny the boy's thinking was far beyond his age. Then Hoburg arrived. He thanked Pastry for saving his daughter, confirmed Pastry's purification rite had been completed, and, without warning, offered Licorice's hand in marriage. Licorice accepted. Pastry and Casserole were stunned by the weight of House Hoburg's status, but the offer stood. The engagement was announced. Licorice thanked Pastry again, and in that moment, her gentleness and her charm caught him off guard. A toast was raised to survival and to the new bonds formed. Squall and Petra were delighted to become connected to Pastry as family. After the ceremony, Pastry stood alone watching the sunset. Licorice joined him and offered biscuits she had baked herself as thanks. He tasted them, slightly salty, but smiled and said they were delicious. Her face lit up. Pastry promised he would protect that smile for as long as he lived, and deep in his heart, he felt it. With Licorice at his side, his ancient dream might finally become real. The dream of a true land of sweets. Later, in a completely different scene, Casserole told Agnes to calm down and listen carefully. Agnes assumed he had bought something expensive again and insisted she wouldn't get angry. Casserole surprised her. He said this was about a new girl entering their lives. Agnes froze. Casserole hurried to explain it wasn't intentional. She demanded details. He described the girl as beautiful, from a respectable family, and that she had a twin. Agnes bristled. Casserole admitted he should have consulted her first, but added that Pastry had agreed too, believing the girl was suitable. Only then did Agnes realize the truth. This wasn't about Casserole, it was about their son. Pastry asked how she was feeling. Casserole answered that she needed time to process it, but the ending came unexpectedly. Agnes's shock softened into something else. Slowly, she began to feel happy, because the idea of another girl joining the family wasn't frightening anymore. It was a blessing. The scene shifted to Riddy territory. A man entered Countess Redis, carrying news that threatened to overturn several calculations at once. He informed her that the heir of House Mortial had been engaged to a daughter of Margrave Hoburg. Redis did not hide her surprise and immediately asked which daughter it was. "The fourth," the man replied. "Licorice Mille Hoburg." Redis instantly recalled the recent kidnapping incident that had shaken noble society. The man suggested that the engagement might serve as proof of Licorice's purity after the incident, and that Hoburg could dissolve it years later once public attention faded. Redis needed no time to see through it. Hoburg's true intention was to calm public opinion and stabilize his family's reputation. His recent alliance with House Katlasek had already strengthened his position, yet this time he chose a different path. Aligning with a smaller house like Mortial, instead of deepening ties with a major power through direct political marriage. The man interpreted this as proof that Hoburg was not pursuing authority through marriage alone. Redis disagreed. Calmly, she pointed out that Mortial's land showed strong growth potential. To Hoburg, this was not symbolism, it was a long-term investment. When the man doubted her claim, Redis explained. 20 years ago, Mortial's land had been barren. Years later, it produced its first stable harvest. In the last 3 years, they abandoned standard wheat farming, planted beans to restore the soil naturally, then returned to wheat, stronger than before. Such a chain of improvement was no coincidence. Redis suspected it was connected to the silver-haired boy. The man objected. He was only 9 years old. Redis reminded him that the same boy had led the bandit compensation negotiations and forced favorable terms step by step through sheer calculation. Her conclusion unsettled her. Hoburg had noticed Pastry's value before she did. The scene shifted to Pastry in a village called La Malade. Crates arrived, rumored to have been stolen from Mortial lands. Mark and Lumi could not hide their curiosity. Pastry explained that they were supplies he had requested from Duke Katlasek, securing the Duke's support throughout the engagement process and its aftermath. Lumi noticed young saplings inside the crates and asked about them. Pastry replied that they were black acacia trees. She joked that he must be planning a black acacia pie, which made Pastry laugh. He explained that the trees were for beekeeping. Honey was indispensable in confectionery. The trees grew quickly and were easy to cultivate. The real issue was water. When Mark asked about rainfall, Pastry proposed building a large reservoir to collect and store water year-round, freeing agriculture from dependence on seasonal rain. Elsewhere, Sheets calculated the year's profits from textiles, wheat, and emergency aid. The final total, 4 gold coins. Casserole visibly relaxed. Continuous effort was finally paying off. Sheets remembered the early uncertainty when they first arrived. Casserole reflected on 20 years of struggle and acknowledged a simple truth. Hard work never truly vanished. Sheets emphasized Pastry's massive role in their recovery. Casserole had begun to see him as a savior who arrived at the perfect time. Casserole thanked Sheets, Quentro, and Boz for their loyalty. Sheets replied that he had chosen Casserole long ago and never reconsidered. Sheets then mentioned he had 2 reports, one good, one bad. Casserole chose the good news first. La Malade had received over 40 settlement requests, mostly from refugees. Casserole understood they needed to accelerate preparations. Sheets was confident that new labor would stabilize the situation. Asked about new servants, Sheets explained that the 5 hired after Licorice's kidnapping were currently training under Glass Age, which reassured Casserole. Then came the bad news. Pastry had started a new project with his friends. Casserole decided to see it himself. They found Pastry in an open area, using digging magic to carve a massive hole into the ground. He admired the power he had learned from Strudel and was already adapting it to his plans. Mark and Lumi stared in shock. Pastry explained that he was building a water reservoir. The saplings would be planted around it to collect rainwater, forming a complete stabilization system. He was genuinely excited, already imagining how this magic would one day help build his land of sweets. Then Mark and Lumi told him to look up. Pastry turned and saw Casserole and Sheets watching. His confidence collapsed instantly. Casserole's anger exploded. He struck Pastry and his friends without restraint, delivering a message that needed no explanation. Enthusiasm does not grant authority. The scene returned to Ridi. Countess Redis remained uneasy as Mortiel's alliances shifted rapidly. Bitterly, she admitted that if she had a daughter, she might have done what Hoburg did. What truly angered her was that Katlasek and Hoburg acted without consulting her, as if she were no longer relevant. A man nearby joked, half serious, that she should marry Pastry herself. She rejected the idea due to the age gap, then paused. Could she find a way to guide Pastry instead? A thought formed, a plan. In the model villages, change became visible. Irrigation channels spread across the land. Farmers whispered in awe that Lord Pastry had created 3 water ponds in less than a month. Pastry arrived to inspect the work. Quentro confirmed everything was proceeding smoothly and that the saplings had been planted. Pastry began discussing future plans, especially once honey production began. Then Josie arrived with an urgent letter, teasing that it might be from his fiancée. It wasn't. It was an invitation from Countess Redis to a tea-tasting gathering. Pastry disliked it immediately. Why him? He sensed hidden intent. Elsewhere, Sheets guided a new worker named Nicolo through the area. Nicolo was shocked by the scale of activity. He had expected countryside peace. Sheets told him to blame Pastry. Pastry arrived and stated plainly that everything in Mortallon operated under his father's authority as Lord. When Sheets asked who built the reservoir without permission, Pastry answered calmly, "I did, on my father's behalf, as the next Lord." Sheets advised Nicolo to direct any complaints to Pastry. Pastry asked about Casserole. Sheets said he was in the royal capital. Pastry mentioned the tea invitation and his suspicions. Casserole later confirmed he had heard of the event through other channels, but Pastry's unease remained. Casserole suggested discussing it later. Before they could continue, an important guest arrived. Licorice appeared suddenly. She said she had been eager to see Pastry again, but clarified this was not a short visit. She would be staying. Pastry was stunned. A move like this carried reasons far deeper than stated. The narration briefly returned to the foundation of Pastry's journey. In a previous life, he met a tragic end during the climax of the World Confectioners' Championship. A benevolent ruler witnessed his regret and sincerity, granting him rebirth as Pastry, son of a noble lord. Given a second chance, he chose a single path: to build a land of sweets that could bring joy to others. By the water, Mark and his friends played, skipping stones across the surface. Lumi arrived and announced that Pastry's fiancé had come to stay. Mark said his father already knew. Lumi added that people were whispering. She was slightly older, attractive, and had a strong influence on him. Meanwhile, Pastry brought Licorice into the kitchen and told her quietly that this was the workshop he had dreamed of all his life. At Margrave Hoberk's castle, Hoberk asked his attendant if sending Lady Licorice to live in Mortalin was truly wise. He admitted feeling an invisible pressure, as if someone were moving pieces behind him. The attendant asked if he meant Countess Redis. Hoberk did not deny it. He believed the Countess had intentions tied to his future ambitions. He also believed Licorice was intelligent enough to understand Mortalin's value. The tea invitation confirmed everything. When asked if Licorice had been sent to stand beside Pastry and block Redis's approach, Hoberk confirmed it. With Pastry's fiancé close, Redis would find it far harder to manipulate him, and keeping Licorice there was safer, especially given neighboring reactions in Lodiura toward the engagement between the two noble houses. Licorice paused at the entrance of the kitchen, her eyes widening as she took in its vast size. She admitted honestly that she had never seen a kitchen this large in her entire life. Curious, she asked Pastry what he was doing. Calmly, he explained that he was preparing sample gifts to bring with him to the tea-tasting party. She wondered if he was making biscuits. Pastry smiled and told her that this time it was something completely different. He poured sugar and water into the pan. Licorice noticed Bonka's fruit and honey placed nearby. Pastry explained that these ingredients were expensive and could only be obtained from the royal capital. He had saved his allowance for months, with his father's permission, just to buy them. When she asked what he was making exactly, he laughed and avoided the question, saying she would find out once it was finished. The moment he added the honey, a warm, sweet aroma filled the kitchen. Licorice realized it was some kind of confection, but Pastry asked her to wait. He poured the mixture onto a tray. Once it hardened, it shimmered like polished gemstones. He revealed that it was a type of hard candy, then carefully shaped it into animals and flowers. Licorice was deeply impressed, but what caught her attention most was Pastry's expression. It was unlike anything she had seen before. Calm, innocent, and quietly confident all at once. She said the candy was so beautiful that she almost didn't want to eat it. Pastry replied that the real mistake would be not enjoying it at all. From a distance, Agnes, Josephine, Mark, and Lumi were watching. Agnes and Josephine seemed surprised by Pastry's restraint, with Josephine joking that he could have at least put an arm around her. Mark told them to stop, while Lumi concluded that whatever Pastry was making must taste incredible. Pastry coated apples with the mixture, creating candied apples, then asked Licorice if she wanted to try one. She agreed. The sourness of the Bonkas balanced the sweetness perfectly. Pastry explained that this delicate balance was the true secret behind the candy. When he opened the kitchen door, he was met with a small crowd of family and friends. Agnes and Josephine said they had things to discuss and excused themselves. Before they left, Pastry warned Mark and Lumi that spying was a bad habit. He added that he had planned to share the sweets with them, but since they had been eavesdropping, he would give them to his father and Sheets instead. Sheets considered whether Nicolo was suitable to become Pastry's personal guard. At the same time, Casserole observed that Countess Redis's tea-tasting parties often attracted talented young nobles from the south and frequently turned into matchmaking grounds. He advised against attending. Sheets agreed that dealing with the Countess required caution. Casserole trusted Pastry's ability to handle himself, though his greater concern remained Licorice. Sheets mentioned that Sarah would accompany her, despite her discomfort in social gatherings. In the end, Casserole decided to rely on Pastry. The tea-tasting party itself was overwhelming. Nicolo was stunned by the luxury of the venue, claiming it surpassed even the royal castle. Sarah added that Rest Bell Castle was known as one of the greatest fortresses in the south. Pastry glanced at the chandeliers, imagining their value, before Sarah reminded him that his role was to stay with Licorice. He apologized politely and refocused. He noticed a painting he had once drawn of Countess Redis displayed prominently in the corridor. The placement felt intentional. One of Redis's attendants welcomed him, explaining that the Countess had ordered he be treated with the highest respect and closely observed. Pastry found this unsettling and wondered if they expected him to cause trouble. Seeing an opportunity, he introduced Licorice as his fiancée, explaining that she was new to Southern noble gatherings. Soon after, Cotton formally presented Pastry and Licorice to the guests. Pastry distributed the hard candy as greeting gifts. The nobles praised its flavor. Cotton compared it to a sudden burst of sweetness and declared it perfect with tea. Pastry suggested sending the candy through traveling merchants as complimentary gifts and requested that sugar taxes not be applied to such small quantities. Heavy taxation on minimal goods, he argued, only harmed merchants. The proposal intrigued Countess Redis, who asked for further details before inviting Pastry to speak privately, asking Cotton to look after Licorice in the meantime. In private, Pastry admitted that the number of guards made him uneasy. Redis explained that such security was unavoidable given her position. She added that if she truly considered him a threat, there would be far more guards, and that limited protection meant little against magic users anyway. Pastry offered her the candy. Redis found it refined and impressive, especially after learning it was crafted by hand using only water, sugar, and honey. Pastry shared his hope of producing these ingredients in Morshel's land someday. Redis was surprised by his plan to produce sugar and honey. Pastry outlined a 3-year vision. Though skeptical at first, she began to see real potential. When Pastry asked for her support through southern trade routes and ports, she agreed, clearly interested in securing a place in the future he was building. Elsewhere, Cotton told Licorice that Pastry had become the center of attention at the party and might attract admiration from many. The comment unsettled her. She imagined him surrounded by other women and quietly left the hall. Sarah and Niccolo followed, trying to comfort her. Licorice admitted she had come hoping to stay beside Pastry the entire time and now simply wanted to go home. Later, Pastry found her in the garden. He reassured her that Countess Redis only saw him as a 9-year-old child. Licorice replied that what troubled her was the whispers, the fear that he might drift away if others showed interest in him. She compared herself to Petra, who was sociable and confident, while she was quiet and reserved. Pastry told her he loved her exactly as she was, and that his feelings would only grow stronger. He asked her to trust him. Then he vanished using teleportation magic. Moments later, he returned holding a candied apple. He told her it was different, made just for her, because he had been thinking of her while making it. When she tasted it, warmth filled her chest, and tears welled in her eyes. She said it was wonderful. Pastry explained that the sweet was known by many names, such as the love apple, and that he had poured all his feelings into it. He promised to fill her life with happiness. As he leaned closer, about to kiss her, the moment was interrupted by Niccolo and Sarah. Niccolo laughed and admitted they had seen everything. Pastry laughed back and threatened to double Niccolo's workload. Niccolo begged for mercy, while Sarah quietly noticed that Licorice's spirit had returned, bright and alive. The road back to Mortellian Manor was still warm with afternoon light when Agnes rushed forward the moment she saw Pastry. She wrapped him in an embrace so tight it bordered on suffocation, as if she had been counting every second until his return. Casserole noticed immediately, praised his son for completing his first diplomatic mission successfully, then joked that Agnes should loosen her grip before she crushed him with joy. Licorice raised her voice to announce that she was back as well. Agnes smiled and mentioned that Pastry had spent the afternoon at home, deeply absorbed in something, before asking, half curious, whether it had anything to do with her. Licorice's interest sparked instantly. With playful intent, she pulled Pastry aside as if demanding a private explanation away from curious eyes. Nearby, Niccolo watched the exchange and silently concluded that Agnes might be more overwhelming than Countess Redis herself. Licorice caught the thought in Niccolo's expression before it vanished. Laughter and chatter filled the air, but Pastry soon reappeared looking visibly drained, as though he had endured a long interrogation. The cause was obvious. Agnes had questioned him in meticulous detail. Still, she praised him for lasting 2 full hours, then handed him a cup of tea. Pastry tasted it and found it sweet. Only then did he notice scattered wrapping papers across the table and asked about them. Agnes explained that they were leftovers from wrapping the hard candy together during their conversation. She suddenly froze when she noticed an image printed on one of the papers. Pastry standing beside Countess Redis. She questioned why he had used paper with that image for wrapping sweets. Pastry laughed it off, saying it was his way of replying to the Countess, humorously tying her image to his relationship with Licorice. Far away, Countess Redis stared at a candy wrapped in paper bearing her own portrait, her anger flaring instantly. A man beside her tried to calm her, urging restraint. She could not accept that Pastry would distribute sweets to nobles using such wrapping. Worse still, rumors had begun spreading, whispers about her supposed interest in young boys. The man reported that marriage proposals were pouring in from absurdly young suitors, some barely 8 years old. In silence, Redis swore that Pastry would pay dearly for this prank. Elsewhere, at Margaret Hoburg estate, a servant informed Hoburg of movements linked to Margrave Lothright. The signs were clear. Hoburg concluded that Lothright had decided to act earlier than expected, likely realizing that an alliance with House Catlasek would strengthen his enemies militarily. Striking before the alliance fully formed made sense. The servant agreed. This decisive style suited Lothright perfectly. When Hoburg asked about the size of the opposing army and heard the number, 30,000, he realized they were unprepared to face such force and immediately decided to send a messenger to Duke Catlasek requesting military support. Back in Mortellian village, Pastry calculated his earnings from selling hard candy and matchmaking portraits. He proudly announced a total profit of 384 gold coins, stating he would keep the silver and 4 gold coins for himself. Sheets was stunned by such a sum earned by a child his age. Pastry replied simply that this was payment for his confectionery work. Sheets added that Casserole had no right to complain. Pastry's efforts had directly increased the village's wealth. Pastry then stated his next goal. He wanted a traveling merchant to acquire 100 goats. Sheets recalled that he had initially mentioned around 80. Pastry explained his tactic: negotiate down from 100 to secure a better deal. He also requested information on purchasing 3 donkeys. Sheets joked that the merchant might get lost under the weight of these demands. Pastry replied cheerfully that goat milk and cheese were perfect for sweets. Sheets remembered their past failure raising goats. Pastry argued that goats were easy to keep since they ate almost anything. Sheets countered that the old problem was exactly that. They ate everything, and the barren land made control impossible. Pastry pointed out that the land was fertile now, and the timing was right. When Sheets asked about chickens, Pastry replied they would keep them for eggs, which the village needed. She expressed concern about labor shortages, but Pastry brushed it off, suggesting they rest for now. He then offered Sheets something to taste. She was surprised when he revealed it was extracted from sorghum. The sweetness shocked her. Pastry admitted it was his first attempt at making sugar, and that he planned to refine the process, turning Morshal into a land famous for sweetness. Sheets joked that he should avoid using magic again before Casserole punished him. Pastry assured her he had learned his lesson. Nearby, Pastry and his friends worked on a wooden project. Licorice approached and asked what they were making. Pastry explained it was a press, and promised to show her how it worked once finished. They placed sorghum into the barrel, but Mark complained he couldn't reach the handle, suspecting faulty measurements. Lumi quickly climbed onto Mark's back to reach it. Pastry warned them to be careful, but the weight proved too much. They fell together, snapping the press apart. Pastry rushed to check on them. They laughed, claiming it felt like flying. Pastry realized the design needed stronger materials and wondered if iron was necessary. Licorice cautiously suggested iron might work. Encouraged, she explained she had once seen a wine press at Hoburg Estate with dual handles operated by 2 people. Pastry loved the idea and thanked her sincerely. Lumi complained that Pastry caused her fall. He jokingly promoted her to official candy taster, instantly earning forgiveness. Pastry decided to consult Sheets about the press and asked everyone to clean up. Licorice noticed how genuinely happy he looked. Plans raced through Pastry's mind. Goat products, sugar, sweets. While searching for Sheets, he ran into Casserole, freshly returned from the capital. Pastry asked about Catlasek and Squall, but the next news was grim. Sheets announced that war had broken out. Casserole confirmed it. Conflict had erupted between Hoburg and Lotharo, broadening the danger. At Lotharo's war camp, a knight reported that no support from the Duke had appeared for Hoburg. The commander said it was expected. Hoburg likely requested Catlasek's aid after hearing the false rumor of a massive army, but nothing came of it. Once Hoburg realized Lotharo had only 10,000 troops, pride would force them to act alone. The commander declared his intent to erase Hoburg completely. When informed that Hoburg's daughter and her fiancé were present with the Margrave, he smiled darkly. Is that the Duke's grandson? Back in the kitchen, Pastry cleaned quietly when Licorice entered. She noticed his distant expression. He brushed it off, but she spoke openly about war rumors in her homeland. She called war foolish, suggesting instead that people should focus on creating beautiful things, like sweets, losing themselves in making and sharing them with smiles. Pastry agreed. Sweets could bring joy to anyone. He told her the goats would arrive today and excitedly described making rich goat milk cheesecake. Licorice eagerly said she wanted to try it. Then came the shock. The goats were gone. The merchant nervously explained that another noble had intervened and bought them. Sheets called it theft in all but name. Under pressure, the merchant admitted they had been sold to Baron Lonsvag. Pastry remembered the Baron's reputation for targeting new noble families. Sheets explained the difficulty of filing complaints without a solid alliance. Casserole suspected the war's influence. Pastry exploded in anger, swearing repayment. Casserole stopped him firmly, explaining wartime realities. Lonsvag needed supplies near the front, and legally, the purchase stood. Pastry felt the loss deeply. When Casserole tried to comfort him, Pastry asked aloud, almost to himself, why people fought at all. It suddenly suggested a solution. Joining the supply corps would grant priority access to goods. Pastry understood instantly. Casserole agreed. They had strong reason to support Hoburg publicly. Pastry declared he would reclaim his goats at any cost. Soon after, Pastry, Casserole, Niccolo, and Glassa, along with 8 infantrymen from their village, joined the supply unit. Mark wanted to go, but Lumi stopped him, saying he'd be a burden. Quattro reminded them their duty was to protect the estate. Agnes worried about the sudden departure, but Sheets assured her Casserole was always prepared. Agnes comforted Licorice, telling her not to worry. Pastry's true motive burned quietly within him. This was for sweets and for a promise. Once the goats were back, he would make an enormous batch of sweets just for Licorice. Elsewhere, Squall gazed at Petra's portrait openly. She teased him for staring, even though she stood before him. He replied sincerely that her beauty required preparation. Hoburg arrived, amused by Squall's composure. When a servant reported that Lotharot's 10,000 troops were advancing, Hoburg realized the 30,000 report was false. Confident, he assigned Squall to the front line. Petra protested, but Hoburg stood firm. Squall thanked him for his first campaign and reassured Petra not to worry. At the Lotharot war camp, reports arrived one after another. The vanguard had reached the border, the soldiers were growing tired, and Hoburg's forces were steadily increasing, slowly turning into pressure that could no longer be ignored. Yet Lotharot showed no concern for exhaustion or numbers. His gaze went far beyond the battlefield itself. With a calm, deliberate voice, he revealed his true objective. He did not seek a simple military victory. What he wanted was a political fracture, one deep enough to shatter alliances at their foundation. More precisely, he aimed to sever the bond between Hoburg and Kildick. His reasoning was cold and precise. Kildick's heir was currently staying under Hoburg's protection, and Hoburg, eager to honor the alliance, would almost certainly grant the young man his first taste of battle. Hoburg would never deliberately place the Duke's grandson in obvious danger, but if the engagement appeared easy, if it looked clean and controlled, then it would become the perfect opportunity for Squall's first deployment. The outcome Lotharot anticipated had 2 possible paths. If Squall succeeded, Lotharot would gain the Duke's gratitude for providing a stage for his heir's triumph. If Squall failed, then the real fire would begin, and there was more. Lotharot intended to lure Squall into a structurally weak position, a zone designed for rapid collapse where eliminating a single unit would cost little and yield everything. The fall of Kildick's heir would ignite rage the Duke could never suppress. That fury would be directed not at Lotharot, but at Hoburg. Once trust was broken, Hoburg would stand alone, isolated, exposed, and stripped of the political leverage he still believed he possessed. Near Hoburg's border, Squall advanced with his unit, still struggling to grasp how quickly his first campaign had arrived. As the weight of command settled in, one truth became clear. This march had nothing to do with glory, nothing to do with reputation. His only priority was Petra's safety. What he did not know was that Lotharot's scouts were already watching, tracking every movement, every decision, patiently waiting for the jaws of the trap to close. A day earlier, Pastry and Casserole had visited Hoburg to offer assistance. Hoburg thanked them sincerely, though Pastry immediately blurted out a complaint about the missing goats, prompting Casserole to silence him before the discussion derailed. Once calm returned, Casserole asked about the state of the war. Hoburg replied that things appeared favorable, and then requested Casserole's opinion on an offensive planned from the forward fortress. Casserole studied the map carefully. At first glance, the formation made sense. Too much sense. That uneasy sensation crept in, the kind that only appeared when logic itself felt engineered. Pastry noticed the shift in his father's expression immediately. Casserole admitted the formation was solid, yet unsettling. Pastry added that the enemy lines were too tight, too prepared, like a defensive structure awaiting an attack, not an army initiating one. It felt as though Hoburg was being guided toward a calculated step, placing himself in the enemy commander's mindset. Casserole traced a hypothetical strike point on the map. Hobrick went pale. That position was exactly where Squall's unit was headed. What Hobrick had seen as a perfect first mission was, in truth, the heart of a kill zone. Squall lacked the experience to survive a layered ambush. The decision could not wait. Hobrick entrusted a detachment to their command, and Pastry and Casserole departed at once, racing against time to prevent the trap from sealing shut. On the battlefield, Squall's unit received word of enemy presence and moved to engage. They found nothing. Then the strike came from behind, sudden and crushing, like a hand emerging from the dark. Enemy forces slammed into Squall's men. Maintaining composure, Squall demanded clear reports and ordered a retreat into the forest. But just as the path seemed open, another unit emerged ahead. In that instant, Squall understood. They were surrounded. This was no coincidence. No chance encounter. It was a deliberate enclosure. As Pastry and Casserole advanced, Glassage noticed Hobrick's assigned detachment was late. Casserole handed rear command to Nicolo, securing their escape route, then pushed forward with Pastry and Glassage at full speed. Inside the encirclement, Squall considered forcing a breakthrough, but fear spread among his soldiers. They were outnumbered. Then arrows rained down. Enemy troops fell one after another. Squall froze for a heartbeat before realizing the truth. Glassage, providing cover fire, cutting a path through chaos. Casserole arrived soon after. Together they drove the enemy back, step by step. Squall stared in disbelief. Pastry explained simply. They had come to keep him alive and to deny the enemy their prize. Squall admitted that their arrival, at the exact moment hope was fading, was beyond anything he could repay. When the report reached Lauteroute, his composure cracked. Hobrick was no longer alone. House Morteln had entered the field. Advisors whispered of consequences, Kildick reinforcements, escalating conflict, strategic withdrawal. Lauteroute listened in silence. His plan had failed, and now he was forced to recalculate, without revealing even a trace of frustration. Back in Hobrick's lands, relief washed over the Margrave when he saw Squall unharmed. He apologized for the misjudgment and thanked Pastry and Casserole for saving him. Though praised, Squall felt undeserving. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him. Petra arrived soon after, visibly relieved. Squall assured her his wounds were minor and promised they would talk later. Casserole recognized the signs. A first battle like that left scars deeper than the body. Petra noticed the change in Squall and wondered how to ease his burden. Remembering how Pastry had once comforted Mark after a failed skirmish, Casserole suggested Pastry do the same for Squall. Petra agreed, asking Pastry to help him smile again. Pastry recalled his conversation with Licorice about how sweets could create happiness. An idea sparked instantly. Ingredients were gathered. While Hobrick hosted a victory celebration, Pastry remained in the kitchen, focused. Squall listened to the voices outside. Praise, ambition, complaints that the battle had ended too soon. Casserole advised him not to carry their words. Squall confessed his fear, not of injury, but of facing his grandfather and of the men who had died under his command. That weight lingered. Then Pastry arrived. The room filled with a warm, inviting aroma. Squall looked up, surprised. Pastry offered him a slice. Squall noticed the caramelized surface, brown with a hint of red, and asked its name. Tarte tatin, Pastry said proudly, made with ponkas. As Squall took his first bite, disbelief crossed his face. The flavor was overwhelming, rich, balanced, alive. Pastry explained how heat intensified both sweetness and acidity. Then he told the story. A mistake, forgotten dough, an accident turned masterpiece. Failure, transformed. If the sisters had given up, the dessert would never have existed. Pastry spoke softly. Failure was not wasted effort. What mattered was continuing forward. Squall listened in silence. Petra reminded him he had kept his promise. He returned alive. Pastry added that guilt over lost lives was proof of a true leader. Petra told Squall she was proud. And for the first time since the battle, Squall felt something loosen in his chest. He nodded quietly. He would grow stronger. And he would never let his mistakes be meaningless. After that, Squall asked for another slice of tarte tatin and invited Petra to sit with him in the garden, sharing it quietly beneath the open sky. Hobrick noticed that Squall's spirits had lifted, even if only slightly. Beside him, Casserole remarked that overcoming the shock of a first military campaign was a deeply personal journey, one that could never be rushed or forced. Hobrick thanked Pastry for helping Squall through such a fragile moment, then asked if there was anything he desired in return. Pastry fell silent, turning possibilities over in his mind, until he realized there was one thing he truly wanted. Not long after, Pastry arrived in the city of Thief of Morteln, carrying so many items that Mark and Lumi stared at him in disbelief. He explained that these were gifts offered as gratitude from the Margrave, then handed Licorice a letter from her father. To Sheets, he added that Casserole had chosen to remain in the Margrave's lands to finish negotiations that would benefit them all. Pastry then revealed that his father had been furious. The trouble had begun when Baron Lunsvag bought their goats under the excuse of war supplies. With a sharp edge in his voice, Pastry added that the Baron had no right to complain if they responded by buying up all of his livestock and raw materials in return. Sheets froze, hardly believing things had escalated that far. Pastry explained that Morteln had contributed greatly to the campaign, and that they had every right to take advantage of the opportunity. At that moment, Casserole himself arrived, announcing that the negotiations were finished and asking Pastry to help move the goods. Even with instant transportation, Casserole admitted it would take time, prompting Sheets to comment that the scale of the deal sounded enormous. Casserole clarified that the horses involved had originally been reserved for Baron Lunsvag, but he had insisted on purchasing them himself. Since the Baron had already paid a large deposit, it was only natural that he would be furious when a lower-ranking noble seized the deal from under him. Later, Pastry demonstrated the juice press to Mark and Lumi, showing them how fruit could be crushed by rotating the mechanism to extract its essence. Soon after, Agnes and Josephine called him over, informing him that he would be traveling with Casserole to the capital. At the same time, Licorice mentioned that her father had invited her and Petra to spend the summer in the royal capital. She hesitated, worrying about what she should wear and asking for their opinions. Agnes explained that this was exactly why everyone had gathered. The clothes they had were unsuitable for a noble lady. Josephine added that no tailor in their territory could produce a dress worthy of the occasion. They wanted Pastry to order a dress for Licorice from the capital. Pastry hesitated, saying this should be his father's responsibility. But Agnes revealed the truth. Licorice did not want any man other than Pastry, her fiancé, to know her measurements. The words left both of them flustered, yet Pastry eventually agreed. In the capital, Pastry delivered Licorice's measurements to a master tailor, showed him her portrait, and requested a custom dress that would suit her perfectly and reflect who she truly was. Back home, Pastry soon immersed himself in a new baking project. Licorice asked what he was making, and he told her it was something he had been waiting to create for a long time. The aroma alone was irresistible. When he revealed it was a cheesecake made from goat's milk, Licorice was amazed once again by how his sweets never failed to meet her expectations. Not long after, Pastry began preparing another dessert. Curiosity sparkled in Licorice's eyes as she asked what it was this time. He leaned closer and whispered the name into her ear. Her excitement doubled instantly, barely able to wait for a taste. Pastry only smiled gently, warning her not to raise her expectations too high. And so, the story comes to an end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and I'll see you again in the next video. Goodbye.